I'm Terry Sharp, and I'm a retired wildlife biologist. Now I help landowners with land management, doing some forestry work and still some wildlife work in the south central Piedmont and Sandhills of North Carolina. And I've been on Sandhills game land off and on for the last 40 years, and that's where I was first introduced to prescribed burning. Working in longleaf pine ecosystem, with my emphasis through my career has been on the ground cover species, the bobwhite quail and the birds and critters that live not in the tree canopy so much, but on the ground, and looking for ways to make room for them to live in the pine forest. I guess if you had to sum it up in one sentence, it would be thin and burn. So you're looking for ways to get light to the ground and disturbance to the ground so that you've got a healthy stand of grasses and wildflowers there that provide cover and food for a whole suite of animals. Recently, we've started working with private landowners more. A lot of the public agencies are doing a good job of managing their forests now, but these are isolated blocks, and so we're trying to work with landowners to connect up these blocks of habitat. So when you're working with private landowners, they can have a number of different objectives, but usually there's an income objective, which might involve harvesting timber or might involve raking pine straw. But most of these landowners are interested in more than just making money from their land. They live there, so they want a nice place to live, and they may be hunters or enjoy watching wildlife. They want a pretty place to live as well as a place to make money or supplement their income. When you first go to visit a landowner and look at their property, a lot of the people that we're working with have properties that have not been burned in a long time. So we have to kind of think about burning in some different ways. So you're of duff on the ground, and you may have to burn several times in the wintertime under damp conditions in order to eat down through these layers of leaves and pine straw that is collected over a long period of time before you can really go in and start doing more maintenance type burns, which you do when the ground cover has been established. So if we start with a landowner that has not burned, but he has a longleaf pine forest that he would like to burn, the first thing we do, we go out there and we look to see what kind of fuel levels are there, what kind of fire lines are in place. We look to see what's going on around him. Is there a road or a church, or to determine what conditions he needs, what wind directions he needs in order to burn. Once you've made that decision you're going to burn, and the time of year is right, which usually these first burns would be winter burns, start putting in some fire lines. And a fire line is just a strip of land. It can be a road, sometimes it can be a creek, and oftentimes it's just an area that you've raked the fuel away from. If you've got grasses there, you may need to cut some grasses. And once you establish your fire lines, you want to think about getting them put in such a way that they can be there in the future, because it's not a one-time thing. Landowners do it a lot of different ways. Some people use a leaf blower and a weed eater. Some people have farm equipment. They use a tractor and a disc or a landscape rake. So lots of different ways that fire lines can be put in and can be maintained, and it just depends on your particular resources. One of the things that the Prescribed Burn Association is doing is providing some assistance to landowners by having experienced burners go out and visit their property before they get ready to burn, to kind of help them through. Look for potential problems like a dead snag close to a fire line that we can take care of before we burn. Try to assess how much help we're going to need. Look at what resources they have. Try to help them gather those resources and use them effectively. and to pick the right times to do the burning. One other thing that the Prescribed Burn Association does is it helps landowners become certified burners. And the certified burner process, there's some legal benefits, but there are also some very practical benefits because it gives you more or less a checklist of things you need to do before you burn and to prepare for the burn so that it can be done safely and efficiently. You're getting ready to burn. You need to get a burn permit, which you can get from the North Carolina Forest Service. You can go online and get them now. It's pretty easy. The morning of the burn or the day of the burn, you go out, you check your fire lines. You want to call the 911 number for your area to let them know that you're planning to do a prescribed burn. You'll also call them when you finish up your prescribed burn. You get your resources together. One last call to the neighbors. Get your burn crew together. Most burns are conducted using the same principles. No matter whether you're burning an acre or 100 acres, you always start on the downwind side. You light a test fire first and make sure it behaves as you expect. You light a backing fire and you allow that to increase your safety zone on the downwind side of the fire. Once you've got your backing fire in place and you've got a safe distance to any flammable materials on the downwind side, oftentimes you can start using some other techniques, some spot fires, which burn a little faster than backing fires but are not too hot. Or if it's real damp conditions, you might use some strip head fires that will burn a little hotter than the spots and move faster, but oftentimes if it's dry conditions, they build up more heat than you want and can scorch trees. Typically, if you've got a typical landowner that has a forest that has not been burned in a long time, you'll want to go through with several cool season fires or winter fires or fires shortly after a rain to eat down through the duff layer. And it may take 2 or 3, or it may take 4 or 5 of these fires to get down to mineral soil. Once you get down to mineral soil and you start seeing your grasses and your wildflowers coming back and the duff around the trees has been eaten through, then you can get a little more aggressive and start burning during the lightning season. Many of the plants and animals in the sandhills respond better to fires that are burned during the summer months or the warm season, and they may flower better, they may provide better cover for wildlife, but you have to get your area in shape before you start using these lightning season fires. So you not only want to look at weather on the day of your burn, you want to think about what kind of weather you've had in the weeks leading up to the burn. Have you had some rains so that the fuels will have some moisture in the lower levels and won't smolder for days after the fire? And you also want to look at the weather forecast for the next few days after you burn. Do you have any big fronts coming through that may have some high winds? Or is there a rain predicted in the next few days? It's often nice to burn when you know you have a rain predicted in the next couple of days, so that if you do have any smolder, that the rains will put it out. Once you start burning, you may want to burn annually for a few years as you eat down through the duff, or you may want to skip 1 or 2 years instead of waiting 3 or 4 years for duff to build back up. Oftentimes you can set up for summer burns by doing a winter burn and then allowing 1 growing season's worth of fuel to collect out there before you start in with summer burns. One of the big potential benefits of this Prescribed Burn Association is that a landowner doesn't have to go out and make a lot of decisions on their own. They can have some help from people who have had experience in burning to kind of lead them through and help them make decisions about burning for the first few burns in particular until they get some personal experience and learn about their particular property and what's going to work best there. From a wildlife perspective, you need to be thinking about what's on the ground, not so much, we're often look at the trees and see the forest, but we don't look closely enough to see what's going on the ground. And the things that wildlife needs is cover and a variety of different plants on the ground. So you're looking for grasses is kind of your indicator species, and grasses are so important to this whole process because they're an important fuel component, and they're important from a wildlife standpoint because they provide cover for most of the species that we're interested in. So the more different kinds of plants that you have out there means more different kinds of seed. It means more different niches and hiding places for wildlife. It means more different kinds of insects. That's kind of the bottom of the food chain for a lot of species. Plant diversity is really important. So the Prescribed Burn Association is going to help you get started with burning. It's going to also connect you with a lot of other people that are doing the same kind of things that you are. Will allow you to network with them, and what we're finding is that people learn about a lot of other things besides burning, forest management, and seeing how their neighbors are managing their forests, and we all learn from each other. So there may be some cases that a project is just too complex for a landowner to take on their own, and there are some other resources out there. The North Carolina Forest Service does some burning on a contract basis, and there are also a number of prescribed burners that do contract burning. And if you have a big tract that's just more than you want to handle, in particular on the first few burns, if you can call in some of these other resources, it may be worth doing. And I would encourage you to get out there with them while they're doing the work, so that you get more experience, because just the more time you spend on the fire line, the more you learn about fire behavior, and the better you're going to be at getting the results that you really need out there. It's not something that you're going to go out there the first time and have it down, and you can't read about it. You need to be out there and see what happens under different weather conditions. So getting out on a lot of burns is going to be really beneficial, and just a lot of fun.